This episode was brought to you by Resilient Nutrition. Pals, greetings and welcome to another episode of Everything Endurance. It is, as always, delightful to have you with me today. I'm recording this on the morning of the 3rd of December, just in time for the podcast to go out this evening. And it would be remiss of me not to wish a massive good luck to Tom Hollins and James Gibson, both of whom are currently out and about in the cold amongst the lumbier areas of the Lake District, heading out for their own attempt at a Wainwright round. So we talked about the Wainwright round before. We've talked to sort of Paul Tierney after his attempt at it. The current record holder for this is Sabrina Verjee, and we are talking 318 miles. We are talking 214 peaks that they have to touch on the way around, and we're talking a minimum of sort of 5.5 to 6 days of really hard graft if they're looking for a record time, 6 or 7 otherwise, just to make it around. So they're going to be having a tough time out there. They've got their own support teams sort of looking out for them and keeping an eye on them out there. You can head over to Open Tracking and follow their dots over the course of the next few days if you want to, but whatever happens with those attempts, guys, good luck. Have a great time out there. Today's guest is taking us back through the mists of time, to a place pre-pandemic, to a place where we had just decided to launch this podcast, which all happened in a real hurry. I mean, me and Chris, it really felt like we decided on a Monday that we should have a podcast, and by the Wednesday we were sitting in a dingy back bedroom with cobbled together recording equipment, talking to Robbie Britton, our very, very first guest on the podcast. And here we are, the better part of 4 years down the line, sitting in another dingy bedroom with cobbled together recording equipment, talking to Robbie Britton. So much has changed. But this is great. This brings us back to the beginning, and I mean, I've obviously given away who today's guest is. That kind of ruins the build-up bit for it. But yeah, I had a great time talking to Robbie. You'll hear at the start of the podcast we kind of revisit that first time he was on the show as well. It was nice to talk about that. We really have come a long way over the course of 77 episodes. We may not have drastically improved on the production values, although you will see in front of me, as usual, our fancy podcasting mic. So at least my dulcet tones sound as Marks and Spencers as possible. But yeah, I've managed to talk to some fantastic people over the course of the last 4 years. There were times in lockdown where it definitely stopped me going completely insane. And I hope there have been times while you've been out and about on your long runs listening to this where I've helped you through some bleak moments as well. I'm not going to big this guest up so much because I've already given away who it is, but we are talking to an ultra runner, an elite fitness coach. We're talking to someone whose experiences over the last sort of 10 plus years in ultra running have seen him run all the way across Bulgaria, Iceland. He's done the Jordan Trail. He supported Dan Lawson through his incredible jog. He's a Team GB ultra runner, and you could not talk to somebody much more passionate or knowledgeable about the sport of running than the person I'm going to be talking to today. And he has gone out there and emptied all of that great knowledge in his head onto paper and created a book called 1001 Running Tips, which is excellent, and you should definitely get it. I'm going to be talking today to, obviously, Robbie Britton. Robbie, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Will?
Oh, I'm very well. Thank you very much. First time I've been able to ask you that in a check back. It's been 4.5 years since we last spoke. 1st of March 2017 is when we put out episode 1 of this podcast with you. How have you been?
Has that been like recovery period? Was it too much for you? Just too much overstimulation of the eardrums for your listeners?
Basically, yeah. It's been a 4-year journey now of trying to find another guest to live up to you. We haven't managed it this far, so I've had to come on hands and knees and call you back in again. If that's all right, Robbie.
I'm always happy to talk. If you know me, you know I love to talk. I love the sound of my own voice, as well as others.
I'm going to stop you there. Does it really? Because I find it horrifying going back and listening to these podcasts and realising what my voice actually sounds like.
I suppose I love talking and hearing my voice come out rather than listening, because I sound much worse than. I mean, I don't know. Like even in my head, I sound like some kind of God, like wide boy who thinks he lived in London, but was actually on the border of Kent and London, just inside in a London borough that's greened the most. So that's how I think I sound. I sound a lot more nasal, I imagine, and irritating than one would always hope.
Oh, I've always enjoyed your soothing voice, Robbie. I wouldn't worry too much about that.
That's why you call me before bed every night, isn't it? To sing you a lullaby.
It's like ASMR. It's the only thing that can settle me down now. Girlfriend's pretty pissed about it, but there we go. And I've done it. I expected you to swear first in this podcast. We were just talking before I press record on this that whenever a guest asks me on the run into a podcast, like, is it a problem if I swear? Because sometimes one will just sneak out. I always tell them the first ever guest was Robbie Britton, and he audibly farted and swore within about the first 10 minutes of the episode. So I've told a lot of people about that. I hope you don't mind.
I know, yeah. Thank you for that. I just hoped it would be a quiet one and it wouldn't be picked up by the mic. But I guess it speaks volumes to the quality of microphone we were using at the time. And I do swear a little bit, but I try not to swear as much as my old man, who would add in, like, I mean, it don't even make sense when he adds his in. I like to do it for emphasis. But if you do like swearing, I highly recommend inviting Paul Tierney on. He can drop them all over the shop. Yeah, old Paul, he's good for a swear word.
Oh, we've had Paul Tierney on, and he was very, very polite.
Wow,
bit of stage fright, maybe.
I could play some voice notes in this podcast of Paul Tierney, and I think like 90% of the words are curse words. It's good.
I think that puts us up a tier on YouTube in terms of the censorship and stuff. And
yeah.
maybe not for this one. Well, I mean, you say about fancy microphones and stuff. I went back and listened to the start of the first ever podcast episode. First time I've probably listened to it since we actually did it all that time ago. And one of the first things I talk about is laughingly saying, well, obviously we've got loads of microphones and loads of cameras and stuff set up in our studio, and then Chris outs the fact that we're recording into my phone at the time in his spare bedroom. And 4 and a bit years down the line, I'm back in a dingy spare bedroom. My laptop is on top of a stack of board games on top of an old suitcase. And yeah, the one thing I've got is a fancy microphone.
There you go. I got a laptop on top of 2 old Apple crates.
Oh, delightful. Oh, yeah. Well, there you go. The production values haven't gone up. But the quality of the content's been okay.
Oh, you've had some good guests over the time. Who's been your favourite guest in the last 4.5 years?
Oh, God. I'm getting interviewed now, am I? Is that what this is?
Yeah, this is how we turn it on its head.
Oh, man. Lake.
He's pretty cool, isn't he?
Yeah, he was fantastic. I mean, not just because, I mean, he was an incredibly friendly guy. He has just really old, mysterious man of the woods wisdom that he just bestows on you when he's speaking. Like, he's obviously a very intelligent bloke. And then after the interview had finished, he was a bit unsure about how he went about with the technology shutting down the Zoom call and everything else. So he was just like, well, I've got a bit of time. And we just carried on chatting for another hour or so because he wasn't doing anything that morning. I just thought, what a lovely guy.
I had a chat to him once he was on a walk. I was doing a piece for Runners World, and I needed a couple of lines from him just about, like, I thought he's an interesting chap, and I actually, honestly, just wanted to chat to him. And I spent about 90 minutes. He was on a walk. I was just chatting away. He was chatting away, sorry. I was just asking questions. And there was some great stuff around, like the races he put on being as close to as impossible as they can be. So he can, not because he wants to see people fail, but because he wants to see people achieve things that he or they never thought possible. And I think it's a kind of a misconception that a lot of people have, that he's creating these races to see people fail. But it's not that. It's just like, you don't want it to be easy, right? You want to see what people can do if they've really kind of push their limits. So I thought it was really interesting kind of way of looking at things.
Yeah, agreed. He's kind of seen as this kind of eccentric sadist of a race director, and I don't think that's what it's about at all. I think it's about he's trying to create stuff that is at that absolute periphery of the possible, Oh, periphery of the possible. I'm going to use that again at some point.
Get that tattooed on your arm or something.
The periphery of the possible. The name of my third emo album. Yeah, there you go. So I'm sorry you weren't the top guest there on that list. I feel a bit bad now, but
I mean, that would have been sad if you'd have started and then just all been downhill from there, mate.
God, yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah, it peaked at the beginning and just then coasted downhill for the next 76 episodes.
Yeah.
Delightful. Well, thanks for that, Robbie. It's nice to have a bit of a flashback.
I'll chat to you next week.
Yeah, lovely. We'll leave it there for now. I suppose we should probably talk about your book.
We can do. We don't want to go on about it too much, but it is good. It is a good book. So, I mean, it is worth talking about.
Hey, no, that's good. I mean, when it comes to my own work, I'm very good at looking at it afterwards and just seeing what was wrong with it. But you feel like it was a good book, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not perfect. God, I found a couple of typos already. Ironically, there is a typo in the section about feedback. It's the first one I found. If you have any feedback.
Oh well. I have some feedback about that. Yeah.
Yeah, no one's picked it out though, because it could quite possibly be very intelligent use of it could be a joke, right? If you have any feedback. It's not. I think it's just a typo because I write certain things and I get excited. But yeah, might be. But it is genuinely. I'm very pleased with how it's come out. So.
1,001 tips. Like, for the benefit of anyone who's listening to this and hasn't read the title of the podcast for some reason, 1,001 tips.
1,001 running tips.
Oh, look at that!
Essential runner's guide.
Yeah,
I did. Yeah. That bit came out. That was a surprise to me, but I'm happy with it.
Didn't realise it was the essential runner's guide.
Yeah, I know.
Just a guide, right?
Maybe I think that became that. But yeah, they're not all about putting one foot in front of the other. There is a lot of subjects covered that all are in some way linked to running, in my head at least.
Well, as a runner, Robbie, and in fact, you know what? That's a weird thing to say. As a runner, you cover quite a broad spectrum of stuff, right? I've seen you on social media when you're really concentrating on your speed in your marathon running, or you're off skiing, or now I'm off to Jordan to do 400 miles there. Now I'm a coach. Now I'm a nutritionist. You sort of cover a lot of bases.
Fuck the coach thing. That's my profession you're talking about. As if I was like, I don't know. I woke up one morning. One day I shall be a coach, my friend.
I think I'll coach today, darling.
Go for it. I've been coaching for a bloody long time. How dare you? That is my as the Spartans when they talk about that. Spartans, what is your profession? Coach. That's what they shout. If you actually listen carefully, they're all coaches. They've been working at it all their lives.
I didn't realise that. I'll have to go back and watch the 300 again.
Backwards, they say coach.
Well, I'm desperately sorry then to have belittled your career. That wasn't my intention, and possibly not the most positive way of starting a podcast. But here we are.
Right. It's going all right, don't worry.
Oh, thanks.
I'm not easily offended, so I wouldn't worry about that.
No, good to know. Good to know. But yeah, 1,001 tips. I was initially looking at this thinking, how? Like, if someone asked me to write 1,001 tips about anything, that'd be me locked in a room for 6 months, steadily losing my mind in a kind of beautiful game chalk on a blackboard style. But I guess you've had a pretty broad spectrum career, haven't you? So did you find it tough?
No, I actually really enjoyed it. Like, I got the commission last October, so about 13 months ago now. And like November, December last year, I did the bulk of the writing. I get it finished by Christmas. I did an old kind of Blue Peter style like thing where you fill up, like the top, it was 1,001 and the bottom was like a little bulb and 0. And I just coloured it in as I went through. And because of the style of the book.
That's brilliant. Yeah, did you really? Like an actual like charity thermometer on the wall?
Yeah, I think I've still got it in the other room. It's like a big thermometer, that's what it was. And and I coloured it in as I did each, at the end of each writing session. I was like, is that enough to add a line? Yeah, I reckon so. And just filled it up over a couple of months. But because of the style of the book, I wrote each section. I didn't write it from start to finish. My mind is not very start to finish. So I like, if I got bored about writing about something, or bored with writing about something, I just wrote about something else that was more exciting at the time. I work. I think the same way with like running. I think like writing, you can exhaust the brain, and it needs rest. So I write. It's like normally it's like interval training. I do like a few hours of I'd really get in my flow, and then I just respect that I had to rest from that, which may have meant cycling or just chilling out and watching Netflix or something for a bit, and then I'd go back and do a bit more, and generally a couple of writing sessions a day, and I'd get a chunk done, and then I'd after a while, I think after I finished it, I left it for a month. And I went back and checked it and was like, yeah, I like that. It's all right. And then the editing process with the vertebrate, they were wonderful. And they went through sections and went, "Did you mean this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I did, yeah." And then it took about 12 months until it published. And it was good.
Wow.
It was very, very enjoyable.
And was it? I mean, did the publishers come to you and go, "How about 1001 Tips, Robbie?" Or is this something you've had festering around in the back of your mind for a while?
No, there's a book by Andy Kirkpatrick, one of my favourite mountaineering writers, called 1001 Climbing Tips, also published by Vertebrae, and they were like, "We should do a running version. Who should write that?" And they were like, let's ask Robbie if he wants to. So that's how it happened.
Cracking. Fair enough. And so 1001, was it like by the time you got to 900, are we just starting to creep along, or did you have more and have to cut back?
I sent over, I think, 1067 in the end, because obviously there are going to be some rubbish ones in there, aren't there? So they're like, gives them the freedom to chuck them ones out or combine a couple that they felt were just conjoined tips. But yeah, so that it wasn't too bad. And there's a couple of sections I feel like I could add in that I haven't covered since chatting about it afterwards. And it's all right. I mean, yeah, again, it's a subject that I'm very, very passionate about. So, and it's been my life for 12 years now. I think started running ultras, 12 years ago. Over 12 years ago now, which isn't a huge amount of time in the grand scheme of things, but I've been totally immersed in it for most of those years. And it's all right.
Well, while we're selling this book here, who should be buying it? Did you have it in mind that you'd be aiming this at a particular type of runner?
No, everyone. It's that kind of well-known market of everyone. No, literally rating it, I wanted to make sure that whilst there was advice in there for someone starting out on their running journey, it had enough in it that there was things that people that are more experienced could learn as well. It's not like your kind of textbook, where you kind of there are sections that are just a bit beyond. I've got plenty of really good textbooks. There's some here that just sit there. Some of them I've read. Some of them they're just again, as I've said, I hope that they come into me via osmosis from the bookshelf. It doesn't work. This is the kind of book ideally people can pick up. They can go to the sections they want to read about. But also, some of the people who had reviewing it to start, they've read it from start to finish and said, actually, it wasn't too much of a chore. And you imagine certain kind of textbooks or books with 1001 tips that you'd be like, I'll just skip to the ones I want to read about. And no, sometimes it'll be about, it's not just having all the answers, but asking the questions. So it doesn't matter if you're a beginner or very experienced. If there's a subject like race nutrition, or training or picking races or kind of sports psychology is covered in there. There's loads of different things, and it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a beginner to take that advice, but it also, because it's about thinking about your own experience. So it doesn't necessarily give you all the answers straight away. You pick up the book and it's going to be do this. Oh, thank you. Because we're all really different. And not just experience levels, but a whole bundle of factors that affect maybe what coping technique is more effective for us in the final section of our race. So it helps you ask the questions that are going to help you find the right answer at times. So everyone, I honestly do feel like I pick it up and I read sections. I read the section on motivation just yesterday, and I found it useful and interesting. And I like to think I know everything, which I don't. But I'm reasonably experienced in that regard. But reading it back was still useful. It was a useful process to go through. So I think, it's kind of from 5K up to ultra marathon. They're all covered. If you want to do trail, you want to do road, fell, mountain, sky running, it's all in there. If you'd like to run for multiple days across deserts or Arctic tundra, these kind of things, it's also covered in there. So we covered a wide range with a reasonable amount of detail, because it's 1001 tips, so you can, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Also, as a process for you just saying there, you went back and reread the section on motivation. You've gleaned some help out of that as well. I can imagine as a process, sitting down and thinking across your whole sort of running career and coaching career and writing down 1001 tips. I bet you opened some drawers you haven't opened for a long time in there and relearnt some of the stuff yourself, right?
We're always relearning.
Yeah.
Not a day goes by where I don't make a mistake that I've already made beforehand that I need reminding of. I I mean, maybe there are some days where you just nail it, but often, like just silly things about pacing, like races or kind of just, I don't know. Yeah, we're always making mistakes, right? It's just part of life. It's as if people are afraid of getting things wrong, but actually, it's perfectly fine, and it's extremely unlikely that you'll go through even a day without getting something wrong. Be it in making dinner, or a recipe for dinner, or just how you pace your progression run, or there's the scheduling of your day to fit in everything you try and fit in. We just get stuff wrong all the time, which is fine. Because it's life. Life's unexpected, and it's not about what you do. It's how you deal with what comes up. So I'm lucky I haven't been listening to Russell Brand or something before this, so I'll get more flamboyant as the call goes on.
Oh, well, that's great. I mean, for the benefit of the few people who do actually watch these whole episodes back on YouTube, at least they'll have something to look at, you know?
I would have put my nicer wheel up there if I'd have just everyone has their fancy Zoom backgrounds. I just have a single cycling wheel on the wall.
Have you seen mine, Robbie?
Nice dandelions.
Yeah, some of the worst wallpaper I've ever seen. But here we are. Yeah, well, I suppose what we're veering onto there is it's written in your style, Robbie. So you've obviously put together an entertaining book and not taking things too seriously. How do I say this without it sounding like an insult?
You're just going to insult me again. You just crack on.
Yeah, no, it feels like it. It feels like I'm about to, but I can't seem to stop it. You don't seem to take things too seriously when it comes to running. That seems to be something you advocate for, the not catastrophizing things and not taking things too seriously if they don't go the way that you planned.
You suggesting I'm down, Will? Is that what you're saying?
That's not what I'm saying at all.
Well, it's just running, isn't it?
It's going a bit Joe Pesci there. You're about to stab me in the neck with a pen.
Yeah, I mean, a virtual interview, right? I'm from London, mate. Don't you know? I'll have you. No, I won't say that. Like I was going to say a rather aggressive line from a football hooligan film, which would be fulfilling my stereotype of scar-faced individual. No, what were we saying? It's just running. It's not a book on brain surgery, is it? Like. No one's going to pick up. I hope. I did think like there are elements in the book discussed, like running in the mountains, running in colder environments, where there is maybe I wouldn't say a level of responsibility with the author, but I don't want someone to pick up this book and then go out and freeze themselves to death. That would be terrible. So hopefully, there is that kind of. But it is just running. It's not like we do take it too seriously at times. I make a living out of the industry of running through coaching, through dabbling in some sport myself. But if I didn't enjoy it, it's not like it's making me rich. It's not like it's not. It is a hobby for most of us. And if we don't look at it in that way, I do think it can impact performance as well. I think from a performance point of view, if you take things too seriously, if you hold it so tightly, you crush it, you're not going to get the best out of yourself because there's all kinds of factors involved. Again, like our own perception of effort comes into to how well we perform, right, and how hard things feel. And if we perceive running as this kind of super serious, hard, kind of like impossible thing at times, then it's going to be a super serious, hard, and impossible thing when we come to do it. Which, if we look at it with a lighter attitude, we can make those hard miles of any race like a more enjoyable experience, and then therefore. We'll perform better. So there is I do have one of the mantras. I think that's a weird term I use when writing the book is good advice doesn't need to be boring. I think the best advice in the world, if it's not interesting, if it doesn't engage the reader, then it's just advice that sits there on the shelf hoping to be absorbed by osmosis. Was this book, I'd like people to take the advice, and there are a good few laughs in there. I pick it up and I read it back, and I myself laugh at my own jokes. I get high on my own supply. But it's just running. It's a really, really fun and enjoyable thing to do. So if you can't write about it in a fun and enjoyable way, what are you doing?
Yeah, it's a very, very sound point. I'm thinking about this across this whole book. 1,001 tips, and across your career, there's got to be some of the tips in there that come from lessons you had to learn the hard way. Stuff that happened to you where you learned that lesson hard. Are there any particular examples you can think of out of that 1,001?
Bundles, probably about 600 of them.
Cool. That should cover the next 20 minutes.
Yeah, no. Again, like when I started out ultra running, there was much less available to kind of digest in terms of information. So, like, it was a lot of trial and error. But I always liked trial and error. Even when I was doing like maths at school, I got told off for not learning the formulas. I remember failing an exam once because in like the practice exam, I'd refused to learn the formulas, right? Which they were kind of like, oh god. And then I'd passed the exam very well using trial and error, which was great until the real exam, and then it didn't work because trial and error wasn't good enough. So yeah, I've done that with my ultra running, just trial and error, like different foods, different kind of pacing strategies, different training, things like that. And again, I guess the other 400 tips come from other people, and learning through working with really good people and kind of watching other people make mistakes is always handy. If someone else can make the mistakes for you and you can learn. And I guess it's part of coaching as well. Right? I work with a wide range of athletes, and we make mistakes together. And we learn from those, and we reflect, and we get stronger and better. So it's I guess a lot of how much you've got theoretical knowledge and you've got practical knowledge, right? And the practical stuff is all learned through essentially trying it and seeing what happens. And yeah, how many really good things are figured out first time round? I'm sure they didn't split the atom like first try, did they?
Well, no, sure enough. I can't imagine they did. But yeah, are there any of these 1001 rules that jump out in your head as like that rule comes from this particular hard day?
I guess I think back to Jordan recently because it's fresh in my mind, and a few of the pictures of Jordan in there. Just things around navigation being like the navigation side of a task being a really mentally demanding and therefore physically exhausting part of any challenge. And I don't know if that is a tip in there. I guess it's in there in general. I can't pluck the 1,000 and like the 700 tip or whatever. But yeah, like just the fact that if you are like taking into account if you're navigating or if you're doing other tasks in a race, then certain other aspects may suffer because of it. So if you're in a pair and you're navving and the other person isn't navving, they are therefore getting an easier ride. And if that person's eating well, drinking well, and then you're kind of navving, but not, you might start neglecting your eating, your drinking, or just running a bit harder than you mean to. That can have a negative effect. So one of my lessons from experience that jumps to mind is appreciating the physical impact of extra mental tasks within your running.
Are there any sort of totally unexpected tips in among these 1001 stuff where people are going to go, what, really?
Yeah. There's a whole section on like where to poo.
I don't think there's any ultra runner that hasn't faced that dilemma at some point or other. Right?
There's a pre-race toilet. This is one that I think I was chatting to someone else. They really enjoyed it. It was trust the queue at the start of a race. The closer you get to the start of a race, the more anxious you are. If you're in the queue for your pre-race toilet, you left it a bit late, got there, you spent too much time pinning your number on, and then you're like, okay, it's 5 people ahead of me, and I'm like, and it's like 8 minutes to the start, and you're thinking, oh my god, that's if they take an average of 2 minutes to each, I'm still going to miss the start. So you start to panic, right? And then you're like, oh god, I'll just carry on. I'll carry this unwanted.
I'm starting to feel anxious just listening to this, Robbie.
You're thinking like, oh, what is it? It's a marathon. Can I carry this stowaway with me for the entire journey, like a little chap hiding on a boat? They say, no, I'm going to get it. And then like 2 people ahead of you, they're going to panic more than you, and they're going to go to the start, right? So suddenly you're number 3, right? And then one of them just needs a wee. You're like, mate, you could have done that in the bushes or that urinal, right? So then you're there, and then now you've got 6 minutes, and there's 2 of you. And then you're like, is that a newspaper in his hand? You start to panic. You're like, is he taking a news? What? Are you going to catch up? Has he got his phone in his hand? That's going to be 8 minutes on Twitter wasted. And then all of a sudden you're at the start, and you've done your bit. It's just 4 minutes to go. So trust the queue. That was one that someone enjoyed. And it's practical advice as well, because there's all kinds of, so you can look at that as a purely practical thing, right? But there's other bits of advice to take from that, like doing your pre-race toilet in plenty of time, but also the risk of anxiety before a race and how that can affect your race. And then you get to the start line, you're pumped, your adrenaline's going because of a toilet queue. And actually, what ways can we affect this or kind of help? We build a pre-race routine that's built in, and that can be linked to your diet, to how you eat the day before, how you carb load like 24 hours before that, and all this kind of stuff links in. So it's practical advice and some comical stories and some lived experience, but it's underpinned by kind of like a reasonably evidence-based, as much as it can be in a sport that's like some of the niche aspects of the sport, like evidence-based approach to actually finding out why that matters and how we can improve it. So yeah, there's loads of, I mean, if I look at some of the sections in the contents, I mean, it comes like, do you need a coach, right? Which is a coach, you think I'll be like, yes, it would be one question, it's not a tip. But it's not, right? It's not as simple as that. So it comes to, you've got like, how to do your long runs, different types of sessions, the chaos of periodization is one of my favorite chapters. When the gun goes off, when the going gets tough, how to run an ultra, multi-day racing. Just for your maybe your listeners, they like to dabble in a bit of multi-day racing.
Oh, they do.
Clothing, sustainability, technology, head torches, poles, fast packing, racing overseas, bivvying and camping, running with your dog. I'll keep going on. There's even a social media.
Everything.
Could have got you in there, couldn't I?
Oh yeah. Well, thanks. Thanks for not thinking of me when that came around.
Well, I don't. These are all from my noggin, aren't they? It's just fine.
Yeah, true enough.
I think there's a good one you'll like if I can find it. Did it say in there? Normally, I tell people that a blog shouldn't be longer than stick to a word count. Yes, some people will read it if you write 5,000 words, but are they really 5,000 useful words? Surely you can cut out some of the superfluous garbage. It's not like you've been commissioned to write 1,001 running tips and have to drag the last 50 out of thin air because you've run out of ideas. And ironically, that's number 992.
Wow. Well, incredible. So words of advice there for the social media savvy ultra runner as well.
Or the not so savvy. But yes,
or the not so savvy in this case.
I'm not great on the. There's no bits about TikTok because I am in social media terms an old man at 34. But depending on when you get this out, if it takes you a couple of weeks to publish it, I might be 35, so I'll be lying. But the writing side of things and some of the social media, I've done a fair bit of that. And actually, I think there's some decent advice on if you'd like to blog about your journey. And you want someone other than your mum to read it.
Hi everyone, sorry to interrupt. Just here to remind you that this episode was brought to you by Resilient Nutrition, and you can find their full range of elite long-range fuels exclusively on the BTU store now. The elite long-range fuels are a series of delicious nut butter products with micronutrients and supplements designed to give you exactly what you need when you need it. They're delicious, they're great for fueling your whatever your adventure is, and you can find them on the BTU store and nowhere else right now. Store.beyondtheultimate.co.uk. That's store.beyondtheultimate.co.uk. Okay, let's get back to the podcast. You mentioned multi-day in there. As someone sitting here sort of representing Beyond the Ultimate, it'd be remiss of me not to tap into a bit of that. It just reminds me, the last time we talked, Chris had just managed to get my arm up my back and convince me to go and do the Ice Ultra. And if there's one thing you said that was ringing around my head, it was be bold, start cold. Is something that I've said to people around the Ice Ultra a bunch of times, where I see them wrapped up like the Michelin Man on the start line, and I just know they're going to need to take at least 2 of those layers off after a couple of 100 meters. And you told me that, and it rang around in my head, and I still started that race in a state of blind panic, wearing every item of clothing I had in my pack, and had to strip right back down again when I hit CP1 anyway. So I'm afraid that tip didn't stick. But for anyone,
at the time, sometimes some of these tips. How cold was it when you started? Are we talking -10, -15?
Yeah, it wasn't even that cold. It was like -12, -13, something like that.
Ooh.
I'll freely admit, Robbie, I was just flat out scared. I was facing something bigger than I'd seen before, and I just wanted all my armor on, I think.
That's one of the lessons I'll often, every winter, as soon as it kind of shifts to winter mode, it take me a couple of weeks to remember that I'm wearing shorts. And that's why I'm cold. And it kind of, you relearn some of these tips, and you'll learn that over the first few miles. And hopefully the next day you were slightly less clad.
Yes, remarkably less clad. There was a jacket that never made it out of my pack again. The snow goggles never went on again.
Same. Same. I had a jacket that spent the whole time. It was on at the start, and then it was off for the whole race.
Yeah, same here.
I was actually on the Facebook group the other day. Someone was asking, and I was trying not to sound like a complete knobhead. Is that a swear word? Is that getting one in? I don't know. By saying, like, with all the best will in the world, I don't know how fast you are, mate. What you're intending to doing. So like how I dressed may well not be appropriate for you. It sounded rather arrogant, but like when I did the Ice Ultra, I ran 99% of it. So I was wearing I had a merino base layer, which I still wear these days. It's like an Innovate one, actually, like an Innovate thin merino.
Yeah.
And a Patagonia windproof, which is, again, I wear still now, and a pair of Patagonia windproof trousers. And actually, in terms of overall layering, that's not much. And when I was running, I was chickadee boot. And when I was stopped, I was rather cold. And unfortunately, we had a sleeping bag and stuff to chuck in. And I had a bigger down jacket. I didn't know whether it's do we still have a down jacket that can go between days, or do you have to carry it with you, like a bigger one?
Oh, right. I see what you mean. Yeah, no, there is still a night bag that gets carried from camp to camp for you, and you can put a big warm jacket in that, but you can only wear it when you arrive at the next camp.
I didn't want to give that advice. No, I had a smaller down jacket with me, but then I had this big -40 mountain equipment one.
Yeah.
And dogs again. Postman.
Oh, no worries.
Oh, it's not me. It's 4 flights of stairs. I've had to leg it down in the podcast before. It's a good workout. But yeah, so like in that regard, like if you're in talking in terms of safety, you always pack for standing still, right? You don't pack for the best case scenario. You pack with the worst case scenario in mind. So again, for any multi-day stuff, you're packing for the worst case scenario as well. So you've got the items to survive in a supported race like yours. It's not like you're going to survive for days. You haven't got to take that into account, but there may be a couple of hours. If someone did like twist an ankle and went off the trail, it might be a little bit harder to find you. So that would be the kind of thing you pack for. But yeah, I think about your effort level and your mode of kind of mode of movement. If you're going to be hiking a lot of the race, because and again, it can go down to conditions. If the snow's slightly softer and you're in like snowshoes that are built for hiking, then you're going to be hiking that race. If you're wearing kit that's going to be good for when you're running, you're going to get cold. If you've got too much kit, if you know you're going to move the whole time and you've only got a decent and that's why I like layers as well, because with a lot of the cold stuff, you can get the options. Whereas you get somebody who get like their main jacket is also an insulated jacket, and you're either it's windproof and insulated. You're either safe from the wind and sweating your balls off, or other genitalia is also fine. Or you're kind of you take it all off and you're just freezing because you haven't got. So it's kind of having that option, having an insulated layer, having a windproof layer that's actually like a thinner shell that does the job. Here's a tip that I don't think's in there. If you do want to test if your jackets are also windproof, I put them over my mouth and try and breathe. You can't do this in the shop because that's like especially post-COVID.
Yeah, I'm going to say especially post-COVID. Don't go around licking the jackets.
Yeah, but if you're packed for the race and you're like, okay, is my jacket windproof enough for the Arctic, and you already own this jacket, I'd try breathing through it. And if you can breathe through it pretty well, it's probably not that windproof because that's wind. But if you like the Patagonia Houdini, the one I use, if you breathe, you just can't. You're not going to get you could suffocate on it. If it was a carrier bag and I was a child, put my head in there, I'd be in trouble. So don't leave your kids with any Patagonia Houdini jackets zipped up. But but some of them you put it on and it says windproof and it's got their company's like windproof material, and you could literally it's like wearing a mask. It's actually you're not going to wear a mask to save you from the wind. It will just make your face sweaty. I'm obviously I'm in Italy, so we're wearing masks quite a lot still here for the supermarket, public transport, and everything. And it's not. And racing, I've raced it first K of a race in a mask.
Oh wow!
I then let it dry out and then used it again. I've gone off topic. I was wary that I sounded like I was anti-mask, and I'm not.
No, that's fair enough. There's a lot of caveats you have to add to conversations these days, don't you? Just sort of, yeah. But no, fair enough, mate. And these are strong tips. We talk about, thinking about being modular with your clothing. You are going to have to go up and down a scale, and we will see runners turn up for the Ice Ultra with these sort of giant padded Arctic down jackets that they're going to wear, and actually it's binary that you're either on or off. You're either wearing this thing, and if you up your pace at all, getting incredibly hot, or it's off and you're no longer warm enough at all. Like
you're carrying a giant jacket in your pack, so you're sweating because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Be modular. Think layers. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and that's covered in there. We cover like the multi-day section covers the food and kind of like just scavenging near other people, look for people that pack too much and just sit near them, go through the bin, stuff like that. Like just the basic things. Like it covers a whole range of stuff around multi-day. I have to like just. I can double check. You just chat for if you can do like a little skit for a minute. I'll double check what it says. And I want people to buy it still, but like if we give them one decent tip from the multi-day section.
Yeah. All right, fair enough. You have a flick through. I don't know. I'll try and think of a joke. Maybe I could sing a song for a little while.
There you go. Even things like early doors, it's worth starting to think about specifically which pack you will use during the race. To do that, you need to start thinking about your kit list and race food too, as it all needs to go in there. And it sounds like a simple tip, but it almost gets that person the ball rolling. You start thinking about the pack, then you start thinking about what goes in there, and you start thinking about the environment. And I noticed recently looking on some of the Ice Ultra Facebook group, it is November and people are only just starting to think about their pack. Whereas the pack I had for that race was probably a pack I'd owned already for years, and it's kind of that level of experience. If you're listening to this and you're doing one of the multi-day races in the near future and you haven't started thinking about your pack, I don't care what, like even if it's a year's time, start thinking about the pack you're going to carry, and then that's going to start the ball rolling. You go, what pack do I need? Because what am I going to put in there? And that just gets that ball rolling side of things. So, it does. Look, multi-day races such as the or the Beyond the Ultimate Race Series are enjoyable and challenging format. They are popular, but can be pretty expensive even before you start buying kit. I'm always honest, mate. I did mumble the other race though, when you're competitors. So that's
thank you. I appreciate that.
Any race that calls itself the toughest race on earth isn't, just in case you were wondering.
Yeah.
So that's the second tip. So
we dropped nothing tougher as a tagline quite a long while ago because we realised that's just not true.
Nothing tougher. Have you tried? Yeah. Have you tried smashing yourself into a wall 1,000 times? Because that's tough.
Yeah. All right. That would definitely be. We dropped it, Robbie. It's gone. It's gone. We've stopped.
There are 32 tips on multi-day racing, and that obviously links into that's about training for multi-day comes into it in another section. Fueling for what multi-day will come into it. The psychology of each individual day comes into it elsewhere. But there are 32 that are specifically around multi-day and cold ones as well.
Absolutely cracking. Wow. You having been through Jordan as well, I'm going to have to. I'm going to make some efforts here to sort of segue us in the direction of Jordan because I'd really like to talk to you about that. But what about our desert runners? So, hello.
We used to. There's a picture of me and Dan looking at a map, looking confused. So again, if you're a race, at least you haven't got to worry about the navigation, right?
Yeah.
Again, depends on the individual, right? Dan copes a lot better in the heat. Dan Lawson, chum of mine, and one of my athletes, he copes a lot better in the heat than I. So kind of just being aware of how you are in the heat, getting practicing in it. In terms of heat acclimation, sections in the book there, it could be 10 to 14 days beforehand. You can start. It's one that's like not too complicated to build up, but actually you lose it quite quickly as well. So if you're 3 months out from your race, I wouldn't be too much worried about trying to heat acclimatise in December in Bolton. That's not going to happen. It might if you wear a bin bag, but it's not going to last. But yeah, it's just thinking about the kit and actually practicing some stuff in as close an environment as you can. I mean, one of the tips in there is about putting your food in the freezer before racing in the Arctic. But the other side of it is kind of like going out on hot days and practicing the food you're going to use in the desert. Adding just getting your favourite, I don't know, what you've got with you and just sprinkling some sand in there. So you just know what it's going to taste like on a day. And when it comes to that moment about you're in the middle of a long day and you're a little bit dehydrated and you've got to eat something like a gel that somehow inherited some sand, you can get through that and get the fueling you need and try not to eat too much sand because I don't think that's good for you either.
Roughage, don't know, minerals,
yeah.
Maybe.
I suppose it's not just broken down anything, isn't it? So it's be class.
Okay, don't eat the sand.
Don't eat sand, right? Just in there. It's just a public service announcement. Please, if you are listening and contemplating eating sand,
it's not one of the tips. Just for your own benefit, don't eat the sand.
Is it in there a little bit? Maybe just practice what you're going to be experiencing in the environment is in there.
No, this is a very good point, because I've multiple times seen people turn up with packs full of food in the desert, and by day 2, after they've been out in 40 odd degree heat for a couple of days, they can't stomach what they've got in front of them. Yeah, it's something you need to know before you turn up there.
Got to test it, and you get food that doesn't do well at -15, right? So if you that's why I chucked all my shot blocks in the freezer, and then and it takes a little bit long to heat up in your mouth, but then they're perfectly fine. Which if you get I remember one of my favourite moments in the Ice Ultra. My food was sufficient for performance, but not for someone who enjoys their food. And I was running along on maybe it might have been the penultimate day, because the last day was a short one. But the penultimate day, and it must have been. I was at the front at this point. I'd started after people, so I got to chat to everyone on the way through. It wasn't too lonely. And then I saw on the side of a trail an SIS kind of cake bar, or might be Cliff. It was just one of those ones that, even in the perfect conditions, are rock solid. And this one, someone had clearly had a bite and then lobbed it. Right, and I'm talking in a clean environment, right? And it's like, wow, this is really perfect. And so maybe it was a dog shredder before us. It was, again, very, very rare to see anything out there, let alone litter or edible food. And I picked it up, and it was like, they've had a nibble, right? Again, this is before COVID, but even then, depending on how hungry I was, I probably would have still considered it. But then I was like, all right, so I put it next to my body to warm up a little bit, because it was rock solid. It had been there quite a while, but in a freezer, so it's fine. And then I ate it, and it was wonderful. It's it come out, and literally it was the perfect product for what I wanted at that time, as if someone had, like some kind of fairy godmother, was littering ahead of me. So I guess one of the dog sledders. And I mean, if I hadn't been in the front position at that point, I would have assumed it was one of our racers, unfortunately, dropping it rather than littering, because it was a British product for sports. So maybe it'd come off one of the sleds or something. But it literally looked like someone had just
had a bite of it,
rock solid, I ain't doing that, and lobbed it. And then I was like, thank you very much. Hold it next to your body, heat it up, and then down it went, down a hatch.
Yeah, well, 2 useful tips sort of sandwiched in there in that anecdote, which is, make sure you've frozen your food, freeze it overnight, and then have a go at it the next day and see if it's possible to eat it or not. And, anything you forage off the trail is useful, right? Calories are calories. Heat it up next to your body and then get the calories in. Why not? Maybe not in the age of COVID, though. And for anyone who is listening, if you do take a bite out of one of your energy bars or something during one of our races and throw it over your shoulder and we find out it was you, that is a disqualification.
Yeah, right, it's tough.
Yeah,
it's hard, isn't it? So when I've done some longer bike races in the last 18 months, and the longest one was 2,000k. I was awake. I had about 5 hours sleep in 5 days, and you're on the bike, and my handling skills are average to piss poor. So I'm eating things and kind of using my elbow on the and every now and again, I don't know if I've dropped litter or not. I really don't like litter. And at the end of each day, I would try and pick up a couple of little bits of litter to make up for any that I might have dropped. So it was kind of, what's it, like a zero? It balanced it out. I don't know if that works or not, but I wasn't intentionally littering. But if I was if I noticed something, sometimes you're trying to shove things in the pockets and it might go. So at the end of each longer day, I was just picking up a couple of bits of litter to make sure in case I dropped something, that I was still I was a net kind of positive. So maybe that's something for our runners as well. I found actually my urge to pick up litter has changed with COVID, because I would pick up litter on most runs, and now I'm like, is that?
Oh yeah, I get you. I don't want to touch it.
Yeah. And I'm like, should I take a litter picker with me on a run? Kind of those things where you've got like a finger. Yeah. Could have that. It would look. I mean, the locals around here always think we're a bit strange anyway. Or just having a glove and in a little pocket to put everything in. But I just kind of do more purposeful litter stuff rather than actually on my runs now, because it just feels a bit weird picking up stuff that people have touched. It's a shame.
Yeah, it is a shame. And there's been a sort of real growth in sort of movement of people getting together in little community running groups specifically to do like trail runs where they're litter picking along the way and stuff like that. Yeah. And that had really been growing pre-COVID. Now it's a little bit more difficult to do, I guess.
Still do it.
Yeah, absolutely. There are safe ways to do it. Just be careful. Yeah, fantastic. Look, I mentioned Jordan back there. We talked a little bit. I don't want to veer away from your book too much, Robbie, because obviously, we want as many people as possible to go over and buy it so you can become a full-time author and just drink cocktails and write books for a living, right? So
I don't think I'll be retiring anytime soon, mate, but
right.
Before.
Well, then buy it anyway, because it's the run-up to Christmas and, Robbie needs a good festive season.
Yeah, we need a new bathroom, mate. We smashed the sink. A candle fell down and went through the sink. So if you could buy a couple of copies of the book, so me and Nat's can afford a new bathroom, that'd be much appreciated.
There you go. At
least.
Everyone listening to this.
To buy it. I don't know where it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Support the author. Support the artist.
Support the bathroom.
But I do want to jump a bit, because it's been like 4.5 years since we last spoke. In the intervening time, you seem to have done a bit of everything. You were just saying before, you got 2 master's degrees over the last couple of years.
Well, I did a master's degree in performance coaching from University of Stirling, which was fantastic. And I'm just going to the end of the IOC Sports Nutrition postgraduate diploma, which is like the 2 years of a master's. So I can convert that to a master's if I do a final project, which takes another 6 months. I don't know if I will, but it was kind of the area that most of my coaching, there are issues with, is nutrition. So not most of it, but a large part of it. So that's kind of what I thought the last couple of years I'd learned about. So I've been doing a lot of additional learning, done some coaching qualifications within British Athletics as well. Just because, that's it. As I said before, it's my profession. So if anything, whatever you do, you try and get better at. And I am a fan of kind of academic learning. But again, I think one of the interesting thing about the masters at Stirling was one of the assignments was how do expert coaches become expert coaches, and it was looking at how they felt, and it very little of it was from organised formal courses. It was through learning by doing, working with your peers, working with mentors, self-reflection and things like that. So it was actually it was a fascinating. It's been a fascinating few years in terms of development. But I also went to Jordan, run across there. What did we do? Had I run across Bulgaria when we last spoke? What year was that?
I'm not sure. We spoke early. God, I wrote it down.
That was 2017.
So probably not.
Yeah. I ran across Bulgaria and I approached my now wife, Natalie, at the final section of that one. That was 580k. It's me, Nats, and our friend Rye.
Delightful.
Yeah. Run across Jordan with Daniel Alan Lawson. That's good. You like the reason we went to Jordan. People ask why Jordan? And initially the project was Siberia.
Very different from Jordan.
Yes. But Daniel Alan Lawson does not do well in the cold. So Siberia and Lake Baikal would have been day 1, Dan's cold. Day 2, Dan's dead.
Dan's cold. Oh,
so
God.
It would have been because it was quite solo, that one as well. So I had team members that were more suited to the cold, but they found better things to do. And Dan was up for it, but we decided that Siberia was not the best idea. So we found somewhere warmer and also somewhere that was interesting culturally, because you don't want to just run around somewhere boring. And my initial degree was, I did a master's when I was younger in archaeology. Geography and archaeology was my first degree at uni, and then I did a master's in archaeology. So I absolutely love places where we can see some archaeology. So,
oh my God, Jordan, you must have had an incredible time.
I was going to say something graphic then that was inappropriate, but it was very exciting. I shall leave that to the imagination.
You were very excited.
Running through Petra, we got there in the early mornings. We went through Little Petra, and we ran through Petra before it kind of opened up. We came in, and it was just... So one of the things I've always said, there's a book by a chap, it's Martin Lindsay. He wrote about some of the early Arctic expeditions to Greenland. He went on Gino Watkins expeditions. And his book, a term he uses, one cannot exhaust one's superlatives too early in an expedition. I was policing that, because the Petra and Wadi Rum were in the final stages of our run. So we were going along, there were moments that were pretty cool, but you can't. People just chuck the word amazing out, like it's that wheel's amazing. Yeah, that run was amazing. Like, were you genuinely amazed by what happened today? and if you use that term out, and then you get to something that is genuinely amazing, like the ancient city of Petra, or Wadi Rum, or some of the other wadis we ran through, like the Slot Canyon. So you looked up and it was like 400 meters of cliff. It's just like absolutely took your breath away. Kind of amazing, stupendous like sights. So I was very excited, and I absolutely loved the trip. And
there's a film that people can go and watch if they want to know a bit more about that, isn't there? Dave McFarlane did a film for you while you were out there.
Dave McFarlane was there with us. It's a film called Lost Dogs and Englishmen. And then Dave also made a film about Dan's Le Job, which was last August, which I was there supporting a supporting role as well. That one, so Lost Dogs and Englishmen is free. The one about Le Job, Breaking 10, is I think about £3.50. Both, I mean, I would just look at it as paying £3.50 for both because you support filmmaking like Dave. But I've watched that Breaking 10 one about 4 or 5 times now. Really, really, really nice piece. Very emotional for me watching it, but I think for others as well, they've said like they really kind of got Dave did a cracking. Dan did a very good job as well. Dave did a cracking job with the film. Dan was all right.
Yeah, Dan did quite well.
Yeah, it was like thinking back to Jordan. One of the like key moments, not key moments, but like I always remember like halfway through, about 2/3 of the way through, Dan and I were like really emotional. And towards the end, it was quite anticlimactic. We were kind of getting down to the sea. Aquabar as it finished. It wasn't the most pleasant of finishes. There was a bit of garbage around, but it was really like we're getting it done, and we both we were sad beforehand. The best moments were during, and at the end it was like, the adventure's over. That's a bit sad, and it was quite anticlimactic. So everyone's like, you think it's like that big achievement to get to the end of something, but actually, if you're really kind of in the moment of it and enjoying the thing itself, then the best moments are during, and the end is a little bit sad.
Yeah. And I think that's a very good point. That I think you can concentrate too much on the finish line in something, can't you? And I know, like the guys that are about to do our Ice Ultra, for instance, like I remember this from my training, that you have this whole sort of year-long journey of working and planning and getting all your ducks in a row for this moment. And what you've got in your head, what you're visualizing is crossing that finish line and getting it over and done with. But it's not right. You know, what you've got there is a 5-day long adventure, and you've done all that work before it so that you can enjoy that 5 days, so that you can really absorb all of those experiences. Don't be trying mentally to get it over and done with. Sure.
You can have the best time of your life, literally. Like you can be for some people, it is the best time of their life, those 5 days. And if to wish it away, to try and I've heard something about writing. I was reading a book about it's David Quantock, how to write anything. Saying you've got to do your research, right? And he said some people enjoy writing, other people enjoy having written. And I'm like, and I guess that's in ultra running's true as well, right? And I think you're going to get a much kind of bigger if you enjoy the running of a race rather than having run a race, right? You're going to get more out of it. You're going to come back to it. You're going to be involved in this sport for years and decades to come, and you're going to get a lot of fulfillment. Whereas if you enjoy having finished a 100-mile race or a multi-day race, so it's there. So it's kind of like the medals there and the T-shirt and all this stuff is. Then I feel like I'd be a bit sad that you weren't getting as much as you could possibly be getting from that experience. It's okay. That's for someone. That's what some people do it for. But I would argue that they would get something more if they looked into it for a slightly different lens.
Yeah. It's not an encouraging way to get somebody into a sport, is it either? The being entirely focused on the results and rewards that you get from having completed something. Like, you've got to be enjoying the process of it, even enjoying the runs that don't go the way you want them to. And
that comes in the book. I think one of the first tips is, like, if you're not enjoying it, running, then sort it out. Something needs to be changed. If you're not
probably go and buy the 1001 Tips for Climbing and try that instead.
Yeah, I mean, that, like, if you want to talk about misery, Andy Kirkpatrick in particular, some of his books like Cold Wars and Psycho Vertical. That man, because he does stuff where it's like 4, 5 plus 10 days on a wall of a cliff in sub-zero conditions, and it just reads as pure misery. And that I can, but he still does it. I still get the impression that he enjoys the challenge, and maybe in that situation it is a little bit more. I don't know. They must feel like the achievement is Like, some of the climbs he's done are brilliant, and like even like you look at what was the other one I read recently, the Bond it was called, about a British and American climb did these two big climbs in Alaska back in like 78 and 80 or around that time, that have since not been repeated. And like the book, you're reading it and you're like, these are extreme situations that at the finish you've done it because you wanted to do it, but I can't imagine there was sections they definitely weren't enjoying. That to me is dangerous because I enjoy it. So I would look at maybe 1,001 bicycling tips before the climbing one, because the climbing world has got potential to provide more misery than the running world, I would say. But the cycling world can provide both if you so desire.
Wonderful, thank you. Not that we're here to front any other books about anything else. We're here for your 1,001 tips.
So I'm fulfilling my duty to my publishers. It's all right.
All right, fair enough. You know what? Go out and get all three. Spread your bets. Who knows what might turn out to be the sport that you're particularly passionate about.
I've actually recommended 1,001 running tips to a few cyclists, because the bike packing, the multi-day stuff, there are sections on sleep deprivation and fueling that will come into play in that as well. So I've sent a couple of sleep deprivation sections to a couple of cyclists I know that are interested in the subject, because there's not a huge amount written or researched about kind of acute sleep deprivation, because a lot of the stuff's around the chronic kind of days, like missing sleep over days and days and days. And there is some stuff with the military where they kind of put you through like massive acute sleep deprivation, but then they don't put you into a performance sporting environment. So so some interesting stuff around that it might not play into the multi-day stuff we do, because you get a good night's sleep. But if you're looking at some of the bigger races like the Tour de France, or there's a few more like 200 milers out there these days, and those ones where sleep deprivation really comes into it, it's a fascinating subject. And I've been fortunate to be able to learn a lot about that through the cycling, because you can do more big cycling events without battering your legs quite as much. The sleep deprivation becomes the limiting factor, rather than at 200 miles into a 300-mile running race, your legs are probably the biggest limiting factor, rather than sleep deprivation. So it's allowed some good experimentation.
I see what you mean. We've actually done a couple of episodes now, like specifically on sleep, and trying to help runners come up with systems for preparing themselves for sleep deprivation and for managing it while they're in it. It hadn't really occurred to me to look at cycling in a way, like there isn't an awful lot of research around it, but you're right, it's the limiting factor if you're an endurance cyclist, more than it is with when you're a runner, when it is probably because your legs want to cry.
I guess as well, I say that as well, like, interesting that we crew run a Nats runners moniker at UTMB this year, and sleep deprivation in that race is a huge thing for a large part of the field, but it's not something I considered, because I'm only going through one night. And actually, a lot of people are going through 2 nights, and it became a huge part. But again, if someone's out for a longer time each day in a Burn the Ultimate race, the sleep deprivation is going to come into it, because you're getting in later, you're having your dinner later, you're settling down later. And you're probably sleeping on the floor under a table, and it's -25 outside. So it's not going to be a great night's sleep. Yeah, I guess. And so like, there's loads of bits. Like, one of the things with sleep deprivation is, what was the term? There's a bigger. So you get adenosine building up in your brain. And that kind of, it only depletes if you sleep. So it's no good, like that caffeine can fuzz the receptors, but it doesn't deplete the thing that makes us drowsy and sleepy. But it builds up quicker if metabolic demand outweighs metabolic supply. Basically, if you're either not eating enough or working too hard for how much you're eating, you're going to get more sleepy as the day goes on. So again, it comes back always to nutrition. So if your nutrition and your pacing are on during the day, you're going to be less sleepy. But it's a hard one, right? Because in the Beyond the Ultimate, being more sleepy is obviously beneficial when you get there and have to sleep under a table at -25. Because it's probably a condition where you can get a good night's sleep that in those a physical condition for yourself where you can get a good night's sleep. But I've definitely slept in some peculiar places, both in my sport and as a young partygoer. I've slept in I think I slept up a set of stairs once whilst hammered on the way into a tube station in Budapest. Just as a picture, just laying perfectly up the stairs, fast asleep. And that's, I'm not saying you should get hammered in between races, because that would interrupt your recovery. But yeah, there are situations where maybe it's good to be a bit more sleepy.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I got another one. There's a lady called Shona Housen, an Australian sports scientist who does some good stuff around sleep deprivation. Some good podcasts. If you're looking for, so that's probably one of the experts I look for. I've enjoyed listening to talk about sleep deprivation while sleeping, actually, on a bicycle.
Well, fantastic. That all tied together, didn't they? It's very meta. Well, at some point, Robbie, I think we're going to have to probably not wait 4.5 years for you to come back on again, because it sounds like we've got a hell of a lot more coaching tips we could tease out of you here for our listeners.
Made a lot of mistakes over the years, remember?
But that's where you learn, and that's 1,001 mistakes possibly that we can all benefit from you having made and written about.
1,001 mistakes and what I've learned. That would be hard because then the tips would be longer because you'd have to say the mistake and then the tip. So it'd be twice the length of book. I quite like looking at. I remember the year when I did the Ice Ultra, everyone laughed at my little flimsy snowshoes. I don't know if you remember that. Everyone was like, "Oh, they're too flimsy.
It's just made of plastic."
Yeah, and then everyone had these kind of like massive hiking ones. And then the next year, I think it was like 90% had the ones I had that were actually built for running, as opposed to the ones that were built for traipsing through waist deep snow in the mountains.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. It's still about half and half now. At least half of the runners. Yeah. At least half of our runners now still wear those exact same snowshoes that you wore the year you did it.
Yeah, good.
I've still got a set knocking around in this room somewhere.
I've used them since when we was in Chamonix, but we have them here because thankfully, Natalie has similar ones, but just the child's version because they were cheaper. And she used
perfect.
The correct dimensions for that.
Awesome. Is that the fact we're going to end on?
Is it? Well, I saved money on Natalie's birthday by buying a children's pair of Ray-Bans for her. She really, because she's got a small head, isn't it? It's no point buying big adult glasses; they just fall off when she runs. So there's a tip: if you are a small-headed person and you find sunglasses fall off your head, try on some kids' ones.
They'll definitely be brighter colours and more interesting designs anyway. So you might as well.
Polarised. I asked the lady in the shop if they still had the same quality. You get the impression sometimes when they're cheaper, they just use cheaper lenses and blind the kids, which is not a great way to go, right? She said, no, they are still good lenses and the like. Is that the tip we're going to end on? The tip I would end on is if you are interested in learning more about your running, I would have a look at my book. I don't feel ashamed in saying that it is a good read. It is enjoyable to read, and there is at least anyone, if you pick it up, I guarantee you will find at least one useful tip in there out of 1,001.
There you go. And, I was going to end there, Robbie, I promise you. I was segueing around to that point that it is obvious from this that just in the last few years, but over the course of 12 years, you've been involved in sort of endurance sports. There's a lot of very, very useful information in your head. So 1,001 of your tips is definitely going to stand someone in good stead, whether they're just doing their couched 5K for the first time or they're trying to up from 50 to 100 or to 200 milers. There's going to be something in there for you. So, yeah, that should keep the publishers happy. We've both ended on saying that kind of message.
I think they're pretty happy anyway, mate. I think they're happy. I've been sending out like personalised extra tips. We've got these postcards because I wasn't there to sign the books. We got a load of postcards, and I wrote bonus tips. That deal is over now. But I had a great fun because if I recognised someone's name, I would write a personalised tip, and if I didn't recognise the name, I would look on Power of 10 or DUV and try and find out stuff they'd done. So even in some cases, like I look at their pacing for like the London Marathon. You can see it, and you're like, if the marathon doesn't quite tie up with their half marathon 10K times, I was like, this guy's potentially a bad pacer, but could also be a bad fueler. So I looked at the splits and I was like, right, your note is around pacing and nutrition.
Dude, you really went in there.
Yeah. Some of them I just kind of like wrote about llamas. It's easier. But,
well, you can't operate at 100% of the time, can you?
No, I mean, I feel that kind of like, I think the tip that going out to a few people is if you can like build a route for your easy runs, it involves mini goats or llamas. It's going to make you smile, make sure you speak to them, and you're going to have a better day. That's gold. That's probably the 1,002nd tip that I would have added. I think it's probably
perfect. In fact, I think that might have to be the one that we're going to end on then. Plan to run by llamas or goats during your long run.
Or alpacas. Generally in the UK, it's alpacas, apparently.
Yeah, that's true. Cracking. Well, Robbie, thank you. Thanks so much for episode 76 or 77 or whatever it is. Thanks for bringing us right back to the beginning again.
Well done. 70 odd episodes that. That's solid work, sir.
Yeah, there's been a few gaps along the way. During the pandemic, we had nothing else to do, so there were a few months there where I was blasting out one a week. But yeah, we've made it here. We've limped our way to 76. Long may it last.
Yeah, there you go. Consistency is key.
Awesome. All right then, Robbie, you have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you very much.
I'm going to go for a run, mate.